He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, and I knew. People always said I had the kind of life others dreamed of. A good job, a nice apartment, a husband who everyone said was such a good man. And I believed them, or at least, I tried to. I used to wake up before sunrise, make coffee, check my emails, and tell myself this was success. This was what I had worked for. But lately, every morning felt heavier, like I was waking up inside someone else's life. I'd stand in front of the mirror, applying makeup, rehearsing my smile like an actor before a show. It wasn't fake, exactly, it was just practiced. The kind of smile that says, I'm fine, even when you don't know what fine means anymore. At work, everything moved fast. Meetings, presentations, deadlines, my calendar looked like a battlefield. And everyone kept saying how lucky I was. You're doing amazing, they'd tell me, you've built something incredible. But I started to notice something strange. I couldn't remember the last time I felt proud of anything. I was chasing goals I didn't even want anymore. At home, my husband, Eric, tried to help. He'd ask how my day was, if I wanted to take a weekend off, go somewhere quiet. But every time he spoke, I felt this wall between us is invisible, but solid. Like there was a language we'd forgotten how to speak. We'd sit across from each other at dinner, scrolling on our phones. Two people who used to dream together but now just coexisted. Sometimes, I'd look at him and wonder if he noticed the same thing. That the woman sitting in front of him wasn't the one he married anymore. That somewhere along the way, I'd traded passion for stability, love for comfort. And now I couldn't tell if I'd made the right choice or just the safe one. It's strange how you can have everything you once wanted. And still feel like you're losing something you can't name. It started with a message. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed danger, just a notification that lit up my phone during another endless meeting. It was from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Michael. We went to college together, worked on a few projects, and then drifted apart when life started pulling us in different directions. The message was simple. Saw your article in Forbes. You're killing it. Proud of you. I stared at it for a moment before replying. Not because it was strange, but because it felt like a hand reaching out from a time when things were simpler. When I still felt like myself. I wrote back, thank you. It's been a crazy few years. He replied almost instantly, yeah, I can imagine. You always had that fire in you. That word, the fire, stayed with me long after the conversation ended. It had been so long since anyone described me like that. At work, I was reliable, focused, efficient. All good words, but none of them had warmth. None of them had life. We started talking more often. At first, it was harmless old memories, funny stories, small talk about work and stress. But soon, it shifted. He'd ask how I was really doing. And I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone. About how tired I was. How sometimes I felt invisible in my own marriage. How success had started to feel like a prison I'd built myself. He listened, really listened. He didn't try to fix it, didn't tell me to be grateful or stronger. He just understood. And that, more than anything, felt dangerous. One night, after Eric had gone to bed, I sat in the kitchen scrolling through our messages. They weren't romantic, not yet, but there was a pulse in them, a kind of electricity I hadn't felt in years. I closed my phone, told myself it was just friendship. But deep down, I knew better. Because the truth was, it wasn't about Michael. It was about what he reminded me of. A version of myself I'd buried under responsibilities and routines. The part of me that used to take risks, laugh loudly, dream recklessly. And now, every time his name lit up my screen, that buried part started to breathe again. I didn't know it then, but that single message would change everything. For weeks, I told myself it was nothing. Just messages. Just catching up. I even joked to my coworker about how an old friend reached out. She smiled and said, that's nice, it's good to reconnect. And I nodded, pretending that's all it was. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, not with fear, but with something worse. Anticipation. Michael and I started talking almost every day. Morning check-ins, late-night conversations, the kind that start with can't sleep and end with you should get some rest. It wasn't about what we said, it was how it made me feel. Seen. Heard. Alive. 3 things I hadn't felt in a very long time. Eric noticed something was different. He didn't say it outright, but I could feel his eyes on me more often. Once, as I was laughing at a message, he asked, who's that? I froze for half a second too long before saying, just someone from work. The lie slipped out so easily, it scared me. It wasn't even a good lie, but he didn't push. He just nodded and went back to reading the news on his tablet. And that quiet acceptance made me feel guiltier than any accusation ever could. At night, I'd lie awake next to him, staring at the ceiling. Wondering when we'd become strangers in the same bed. He'd turn in his sleep, and sometimes his hand would find mine out of habit. It should have made me feel comforted. Instead, I felt like I was betraying him with my thoughts. Michael started asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Are you happy? Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? He didn't mean them to be traps, but they were. Every answer I gave pulled me further away from the life I'd built. The one that used to make sense. And closer to something I couldn't define. One night, he called instead of texting. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice was exactly how I remembered it. Calm, confident, a little rough around the edges. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Until he said quietly, I always wondered what would have happened if we'd stayed in touch. The air between us changed. I didn't reply. He didn't push. But the silence said everything. After that night, the line we hadn't crossed didn't feel as far away anymore. Every time I opened my phone, it felt like standing on the edge of something dangerous. And yet, I couldn't step back. I told myself I had control. That I knew where to stop. But deep down, I think I already knew. I'd started something I wouldn't be able to finish without breaking something else. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing extraordinary about that day, no warning, no sign that something would shift. I left work late, exhausted, half listening to the sound of rain tapping against the car windows. The city was wrapped in that quiet kind of darkness that makes you feel both invisible and exposed. Michael texted me. Still at work? I replied, just left. You? He said, nearby. Coffee? I hesitated. My heart did that strange flutter it always did when I saw his name. I typed and erased my reply 3 times before finally sending, sure. Just for a bit. I told myself it was just coffee. Just 2 old friends catching up. But even as I parked the car, I knew that was a lie. He was already there when I walked in, same easy smile, same calm energy that always disarmed me. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. He stood up, hugged me, and everything that had been confined to screens suddenly became real. His voice, his warmth, his presence, it was all too familiar, too close. We talked like no time had passed. About work, about life, about nothing at all. But beneath the small talk, something unspoken moved between us, something electric, something dangerous. Every time our eyes met, it lingered a little too long. Every time he laughed, I felt it somewhere deep in my chest. At one point, he said, "You look tired." I smiled, "That's because I am." He looked at me like he wanted to say something more, but instead he said softly, "You deserve to be happy, you know." The words hit harder than I expected. Not because of what he said, but because of how much I wanted to believe him. When we left, the rain had stopped. We stood by my car, the streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement. He said, "It was good to see you again." I nodded, but neither of us moved. Then he reached out, just brushed a strand of hair from my face. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like the ground shifted beneath me. I didn't stop him. I didn't step back. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't passionate or rushed. It was quiet, hesitant, and real. And the moment it happened, I felt everything, guilt, relief, fear, longing, crash into me all at once. When we pulled apart, I didn't know what to say. He whispered, "I'm sorry." And I said, "Me too." That night, I drove home in silence. Every red light felt like a spotlight, every glance in the rearview mirror like a confession. When I walked into the apartment, Eric was on the couch, half asleep, the TV flickering blue across his face. He smiled when he saw me. "Hey. Long day?" I nodded. "Yeah. Just, long." I kissed his forehead, whispered goodnight, and went to the bathroom. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were wide, her lips still trembling. And for the first time, I realized I had become the kind of person I used to judge. The worst part wasn't that I'd crossed the line. It was that I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. After that night, everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The world didn't stop spinning, no one seemed to notice the difference. But I did. It was in the small things, the way I hesitated before touching Eric. The way my laughter at work felt rehearsed. The way my phone suddenly became both a lifeline and a threat. Michael didn't call the next day. Or the one after. I told myself that was good, that it meant he felt the same guilt I did. That we'd both quietly agree to bury what happened. Pretend it was nothing more than a mistake. But guilt has a way of finding cracks in your logic. And soon, the silence between us became unbearable. A week later, he texted. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. My chest tightened. I wanted to ignore it. But my hands didn't listen. "Where?" I typed back. "We met in a park, far from where anyone might see us." When I saw him walking toward me, I realized I'd missed him. Not the way I should have, but in a way that scared me. He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to smile or apologize. Finally, he said, "I can't stop thinking about you." And I hated how much I wanted to hear that. We didn't touch. We didn't kiss. But that almost made it worse. Because now it wasn't just a moment. It was a choice. A quiet, deliberate connection that lived in the spaces between our words. At home, Eric started asking more questions. Nothing direct, just little things. "Why are you smiling at your phone? Who keeps texting this late?" I had excuses ready, easy lies that rolled off my tongue before I could stop them. And every time he believed me, I felt a piece of myself crumble. One evening, he surprised me with dinner, candles, music, my favorite wine. I tried to act surprised, tried to be there. But I couldn't stop seeing the reflection of Michael's face in every quiet pause. Eric took my hand and said, "You've seemed far away lately. Are you okay?" My throat went dry. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Work's been insane." He squeezed my hand. And I felt this wave of shame so strong I almost pulled away. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the floor of the bathroom. The cold tiles pressing against my skin. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I just stared at the pattern of the tiles and thought. This is how people ruin their own lives, not in one big mistake. But in 1,000 small moments they keep pretending don't matter. The next morning, I deleted all of Michael's messages. Every text, every photo, every word that tied me to that night. But even after I wiped it all clean, I could still feel his presence. Like a ghost that refused to leave. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. The hardest part wasn't lying to Eric. It was lying to myself. I started waking up earlier. Not because I wanted to, but because sleep stopped feeling safe. Every dream was a replay, every morning a reminder. Eric would still be asleep beside me, his breathing steady, peaceful. I'd stare at the ceiling and think about how easy it would be to tell him everything. Just say it, spill it out, get it over with. But every time I pictured his face, I couldn't do it. I was too afraid of the look that would replace the love. So I did what I'd always done, I tried to fix it. I cooked more, laughed more, kissed him first. I threw myself into our marriage like someone trying to patch a sinking ship with bare hands. And for a while, it almost worked. He smiled more. We went out, held hands, talked about maybe taking a trip somewhere. For a brief moment, I thought I'd done it. I thought I'd found a way to erase what happened. But guilt doesn't disappear. It just learns how to hide. At work, I avoided Michael's name like it was poison. We hadn't spoken since I deleted the messages. But sometimes I'd see his name flash on social media, a post, a comment. And my heart would react before my mind could stop it. It wasn't longing anymore. It was shame. That sharp, breathless kind that reminds you how fragile your secrets are. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office. The building was almost empty, the air heavy with silence. I sat there, staring at a blank spreadsheet, feeling the walls close in. I'd built this entire life on discipline, on being the woman who always had control. And now, I couldn't even trust myself. Every choice I made felt like penance, like I was trying to earn forgiveness without ever asking for it. When I finally got home, Eric was waiting at the table. He looked tired, not angry, not suspicious, just tired. He said, "We haven't really talked in a while." My stomach twisted. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Can we just talk?" I sat down, trying to steady my breathing. He said, "I feel like you're here, but not really. Like something's changed and you're just pretending it hasn't." I wanted to scream that he was right. That I wasn't the same person anymore. That I didn't know how to be. But all that came out was, "I've just been stressed. Work's been hard." He nodded, slowly. "Okay," he said quietly. "Then let's get through it together." He reached across the table and took my hand. It was warm, familiar. But I felt nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because the part of me that used to reach back wasn't there anymore. That night, I lay awake again, the room too quiet, my chest too full. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I didn't miss Michael. I missed who I was when I was with him. The version of me that wasn't weighed down by expectation. The one who still believed happiness was something she could choose. But I couldn't go back, not to him, not to who I was before. And that left me in the worst place of all. Somewhere in between. Would you like me to continue with Block 7? Where the emotional climax hits. The confrontation she's been avoiding finally happens. And everything she's tried to control begins to collapse in one irreversible moment. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of quiet day that should have been peaceful. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with the smell of rain. We were supposed to visit Eric's parents for dinner. But I'd told him I wasn't feeling well. That wasn't a lie. I hadn't been feeling well for months. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling mindlessly. When I saw it, a message request. From Michael. Just one line. "I miss you." It felt like someone had dropped ice water into my chest. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers frozen above the screen. I didn't reply. I couldn't. But the silence said enough. Eric came out of the kitchen holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one and smiled, that soft, gentle smile that once made me feel safe. "Hey," he said, "you okay? You look pale." And for some reason, that simple kindness broke something inside me. The phone slipped from my hand. He caught it before it hit the floor. His eyes flicked to the screen, just for a second. But it was enough. He froze. And I saw the change in his face, the confusion first. Then the hurt. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me like he was trying to fit all the missing pieces together at once. "Who's Michael?" he asked quietly. My throat went dry. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He said it again, louder this time, his voice cracking. "Who the hell is Michael?" I could have lied. I could have said he was an old coworker, a friend. But I was tired. So tired of holding the truth underwater. So I said it. Not all of it, just enough to make it real. "He's someone I shouldn't have talked to." Eric laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You shouldn't have talked to," he repeated. "Jesus, Sarah, do you even hear yourself?" I wanted to tell him it wasn't what he thought. That it wasn't about sex or betrayal. That it was about feeling seen, about remembering who I was. But how do you explain something like that to the person you've already broken? He asked, "Did you sleep with him?" The silence that followed was louder than any confession. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He stood there, staring at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he said, "You know, I could have forgiven almost anything. But not this." And he walked out. The door closed behind him with a sound I'll never forget. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. I sat there, still holding the untouched cup of coffee. It had gone cold, just like everything else in the room. I didn't cry right away. The tears came later, not in a rush, but in waves. Slow, relentless, like the body's way of catching up to what the heart already knew. That night, I slept on the couch. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. That disbelief, that quiet heartbreak that no apology could ever fix. And when the sun rose, I realized something simple and cruel. The life I'd been trying so hard to save was already gone. The apartment was too quiet. I woke up to the sound of the refrigerator humming, the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. And the realization that Eric's side of the bed was cold. He hadn't come home. Part of me had hoped it was just a nightmare. That I'd walk into the kitchen and see him sitting there, reading the news like always. But the chair was empty. His jacket was gone. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't a moment I could fix with an apology or a promise. This was real. I made coffee, even though I couldn't drink it. The smell filled the room. And for a brief second, I thought of how he used to say it was his favorite part of the morning. The smell of coffee, the sound of me humming absent-mindedly while I worked. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. The day dragged by like it was made of glass, every movement careful. Every sound sharp. People from work texted, asking if I was okay. But I didn't reply. What could I even say? That I'd destroyed everything good in my life because I didn't know how to live with myself? By evening, I found myself scrolling through my old photos. The vacations, the dinners, the smiles. All of them looked perfect. Too perfect. Like pictures of strangers pretending to be happy. And maybe that's what we've been doing all along. Acting out the idea of a perfect marriage instead of actually living it. At some point, I called Eric. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound small compared to what I'd done? I sat by the window for hours, watching the city lights blur through the glass. It felt like the world was moving on without me. Like I'd stepped out of my own life and couldn't find the way back in. Michael texted again. Are you okay? 3 words. Simple. Kind. And completely wrong. I stared at them until my vision blurred. Then deleted the conversation for the last time. It wasn't anger, it was exhaustion. I was done trying to fill the emptiness with other people. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening to the quiet. Realizing that this silence, was the one thing I'd been running from all along. It wasn't loneliness that scared me. It was being alone with the truth. The truth that I wasn't happy. That I hadn't been for a long time. And that I'd been too afraid to admit it. Because admitting it would mean tearing down everything I'd built my identity around. For years, I'd been the woman who had it all. The job, the husband, the image of stability. But somewhere in chasing perfection, I'd forgotten how to be honest. And now, that dishonesty had cost me everything that actually mattered. When I finally went to bed, I whispered something to the dark. Not as an apology, not as a prayer. Just as a truth I could finally say out loud. I did this. And I have to live with it. And for the first time, those words didn't destroy me. They freed me. Time didn't heal anything, not at first. It just softened the edges of the pain. Turned sharp grief into a dull, constant ache I could learn to live with. Days blurred into weeks. And somewhere between cleaning the apartment and answering meaningless emails, I realized I wasn't waiting for Eric to come back anymore. He'd called once. Just once. It was short, awkward, polite, even. He said he was staying at his brother's for a while. That he needed space. I told him I understood. And for the first time in our marriage, I actually meant it. After that, I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. Stopped scrolling through old messages. Stopped rehearsing apologies in my head that would never be said the right way. Instead, I started doing small things. Things that didn't feel like survival. But like the slow process of remembering who I was before everything got so loud. I started walking every morning before work. Just me, the city, and the sound of my own footsteps. The first few times, I didn't think about anything. I just let the world move around me. The buses, the strangers, the smell of bread from the bakery at the corner. And one morning, as the sun rose, I caught myself smiling for no reason at all. It wasn't happiness exactly. But it was close enough to recognize it. At work, people stopped tiptoeing around me. They didn't know the details, only that Eric and I were taking time apart. I threw myself into projects again. But this time not to prove something to anyone. Just because I liked the feeling of building something that didn't depend on anyone else. It was strange. I was finally succeeding for myself, not for the version of me the world expected. Sometimes, though, the guilt would sneak back in. Quietly, like a shadow that still knew my name. A song, a scent, an empty chair across the table. And suddenly, the air would get heavy again. But instead of running from it, I'd sit with it. Let it ache. Let it be part of me. One evening, I saw Eric's name light up my phone again. My heart didn't race this time. It just steadied. He didn't call, just sent a message. I hope you're doing okay. I read it 3 times before replying. I'm trying. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker below. I thought about how strange it was. How you can destroy something beautiful and still find a way to grow from the ruins. I wasn't proud of what I'd done. But for the first time, I stopped hating myself for it. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not someone else saying it's okay, but learning to believe that you still deserve to start again. A year passed before I even realized it. Seasons came and went quietly, like the world had learned to move without me needing to chase it. The apartment didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt mine. Some days, I still woke up expecting to hear Eric's footsteps in the hallway. The sound of him humming as he made coffee. Other days, I woke up and just smiled at the silence. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. We met once, months later. It wasn't planned. I was leaving the office when I saw him across the street. He looked good older, calmer, maybe even happier. He smiled when he saw me, that soft, cautious kind of smile people wear when they've made peace with the past. We talked for a few minutes. About work, about his family, about nothing important. And then, before he left, he said, "You seem different." I laughed. "I hope so." He nodded, looked like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. And as I watched him walk away, I realized that for the first time, I didn't feel regret. Just gratitude that once, for a time, we tried. I went home that night, poured myself a glass of wine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. Not Eric. Not Michael. Not the version of myself I'd spent years pretending to be. I was finally living a life that wasn't about what I should do, but what I actually wanted. I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. At first, the lines were shaky, the colors too dark. But as the weeks passed, they softened. Like even the canvas had learned to forgive me. I didn't paint for anyone else. I painted because it made me feel alive. One Sunday morning, I walked to the park. The same one where Michael and I had met that day. The air was cool, the sun pale and kind. I sat on a bench, watching the world unfold. Kids chasing pigeons, a couple arguing softly. An old man feeding birds like it was his purpose. And for a fleeting moment, I realized. Life doesn't stop for heartbreak. It just changes shape. There are still days when the past whispers. When a certain song makes my chest tighten. When I remember the look in Eric's eyes that day. When I wonder how differently things could have gone. But I don't run from those thoughts anymore. I let them pass through me, like wind through open windows. Because maybe that's what growing up really is. Understanding that you can't undo what's been done. But you can choose who you become after it. So I chose peace. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The one that finds you on an ordinary morning. When you realize that for the first time in a long time. You're not surviving. You're living. If you were in her place, would you have told the truth? Comment your answer.